Heard me speak before, I always really, even like the very first slide has some information that I like to share with people. And it was mentioned during my bio. You know, we at the Division of Child Support Services in 2015, within the Markell administration, went ahead and changed our division's name. And the reason why we chose to do that is really because it was moving away from enforcement and moving towards service. And not that we weren't always a service or organization, but we weren't really like considered law enforcement. So you know, one of the first things that I chose to do once I became the division director was to go ahead and change our division's name. And since 2015, child support organizations all around the country are also making this shift. And I'm proud to say that Delaware was one of the first state agencies to do that. The Federal Office of Child Support Services this past year even went forward with changing their name at the federal level from the Office of Child Support Enforcement to the Office of Child Support Services. So I'm extremely proud of leading that effort. And one of the things that goes along with that is, you know, we can change all the names that we want to do, but we really have to prove to the public that we are a service-oriented agency. And you know, that change doesn't only take place with the public, but it also takes place internal at our three child support offices, and trying to change a culture of getting away from just, you know, enforcing child support obligations that are created by the family court, but actually providing a service to both custodial and non-custodial parents here in the state of Delaware. This slide is our division's mission statement. And you know, one of the things that we did quickly after changing our division's name was really take a look at our previous mission statement, and really made some drastic changes to you know, get away from that all business type of mission, and really focusing on what is really important for us as a child support organization here in Delaware. And it's really centered on the family. It's really centered on working closely with both custodial and non-custodial parents in achieving child support obligations to meet the financial, medical, and emotional needs to promote family self-sufficiency. When we as a division, as one of the divisions within the Department of Health and Social Services, you know, we are really focused on trying to help individuals as a department to support self-sufficiency. And it's important for us to make sure that individuals who are placed under a child support order by the family court are placed under an order that is accurate, and that really both parents are able to self-support themselves and to pay child support obligations. So, you know, this mission statement is really a change from our previous mission statement, which quite honestly was really all business. And this is a little bit more focused on the family and what we are trying to achieve as a child support organization. I just wanted to make sure from a customer service perspective, Our child support agency is rather small in consideration with other divisions within the Department of Health and Social Services. We have 3 child support offices statewide, 1 in each county. And as you can see, our office in Newcastle County is located at 84A Christiana Road. And that office not only houses the child support specialists who are doing the case processing of child support obligations, but it also houses our estate disbursement unit. And that's where all of the child support payments are sent into. It also houses our customer service unit and our accounting unit, as well as the office of the director and some smaller units within the division, such as our policy unit, training unit, and fiscal unit. In Kent County, we're located at 905 South Governors Avenue, and that building looks familiar. It's the Department of Elections, and we're on the 2nd floor here in Kent County. I always refer to us as being just about a quarter mile south of Kent General Hospital. And then in Sussex County, we're located at the Georgetown Professional Park. And it was the old office of the Social Security Administration maybe about 5 or 6 years ago. And I always refer, when I talk about our Sussex County location, I always refer to the office location across from the Walmart on Route 113. Now, all 3 offices are open to the public. So it's open for custodial and non-custodial parents who have child support obligations that they need to talk to a child support specialist about. Or if someone is applying for child support services, they can come to one of the offices and get an application or get some assistance with completing the application so that we can start a child support case on their behalf. I always, whenever I'm doing a presentation, and I talk about this a lot, the child support program has 2 customer websites. And as you can see in that first line, it has 2 new customer websites, but actually we've had them for quite some time. And one of those customer websites is an online application website. And the other one is a customer website. So anyone who is applying for child support, they want a child support case created, and they want our assistance in working with the Department of Justice to create, filing a petition with the family court to create a child support obligation. They can go to my.delaware.gov and actually download the app that talks about the child support online application website. And they can actually fill out a child support application and submit it to our office electronically. And we would be able to open a child support case and reach out to that person to move the case to the next step. Now, the customer website is available to both custodial and non-custodial parents who have a child support case with us here at the Division of Child Support Services. And by having access to the customer website, both parents can receive notices from the child support office electronically. They can submit case-specific questions to their child support specialist. I always refer to that as like a quasi email system. So, oftentimes we hear that people are on hold. I'm trying to reach somebody at our customer service unit. This is an alternative way for someone to reach out and actually have contact with their child support worker and ask a question and get a response back through the customer website. They can update contact information and employment information, and they can actually view appointments, including family court hearings, through that customer website. Now, oftentimes people have to come to our child support office to get an account statement. If they have the customer website by going to my.delaware.gov, they can actually print child support account statements from home and not have to come into the child support office to get it. So this, I'm always trying to promote these 2 websites, especially the customer website, just so that it's an easy way for both parents who have questions about their child support case to reach out to the child support office. And this is the my.delaware.gov website, that top picture. And the individual has to create a username and password and sign up. And then once they're in the my.delaware.gov app, they can then pull down one or add one or both of these customer websites so that they can have access to their child support case through the my.delaware.gov app. I wanted, as I mentioned already, we have a customer service unit that's located in Newcastle County, but it takes phone calls from any place in the state of Delaware or from around the country, quite honestly. The customer service unit is made up of 20 child support specialists, and they're available Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. to take telephone calls. And the reason why, our offices are open till 4:30, but we have to stop the calls from coming in so that any calls that are in the queue can be answered between 4 and 4:30. There are bilingual lines associated with the customer service unit, and we have bilingual employees who can answer individuals who speak Spanish or other types of languages. We also have, as part of our customer service unit, an automated assistance line. And that line is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to provide individuals with case information. You just have to have your child support case number in order to access payment history or other type of information through that customer service unit telephone numbers. And those are the numbers at the bottom of the screen. So there are 20 child support specialists that are able to answer telephone calls and assist with questions about an individual's child support case. And lastly, this is just a list of resources. This is the first one is our child support website. There is a ton of good information on our child support website. And I'm always encouraging people to who have questions about how child support works, or specific questions about enforcement activities or payment, how to make a payment. It's all there on our child support website. We have a Facebook page. The Facebook page we use quite frequently to post employment opportunities. If individuals are looking for a place to work, there's information about job postings that are on our Facebook page. On the first Monday of every month from 11:30 to 12:30, I spend an hour doing a Facebook Live event answering questions from custodial and non-custodial parents about child support in the state of Delaware, and also providing information about how we process cases. So I'm always encouraging individuals, custodial and non-custodial parents, or just individuals who are interested in how child support works, to come to our Facebook page and tune into our Facebook Live event the first Monday of every month from 11:30 to 12:30. And I enjoy doing that and answering questions from the public. And then there's just the Family Courts website and our Federal Office of Child Support Services website. And that's just some resources for additional information. And then lastly, here's my contact information. And that's, just some of the things I felt were important to talk about as far as how individuals can get a hold of us and reach out to the child support office, whether they have a question. And as I've mentioned a couple of times through that brief presentation, we are available to help both custodial and non-custodial parents. As the Division of Child Support Services, we really want to provide a quality service to both custodial, and specifically, we want to be available to answer questions from non-custodial parents about their child support situations. So I'm going to stop sharing, and I will turn it back over to you.
Well, Mr. Memengross, thank you so much for sharing the information and providing those resources. Hopefully, individuals will be able to utilize those resources as needed as they, navigate through the Division of Child Support. So thank you for sharing that. So why don't we shift gears here? I think we're gonna hear now from John Reynolds, and he is going to give us some good information John, you want to go ahead and just start with what you have, your part of what you want to share?
Sure, definitely. And Rep. Dorsey Walker, I'm not going to steal any of your very, very earned time to talk about your bill, but I am going to just quickly highlight some of the things that are going on in Delaware related to Rep. Dorsey Walker's HB 267 with House Amendment 1, and also just talk about kind of how this work around changing how Delaware approaches license suspensions, and just penalties tied to people's paying an ability to pay different obligations they may have as part of our justice systems. I'm going to try and contextualize some of the movement Delaware has been making overall. So, um, in recent years, Delaware has really been doing a lot of asking a lot of hard questions about what is the appropriate way to deal with things like outstanding fines and fees, outstanding and owed child support orders, as well as how can we best support people as they're trying to meet their obligations rather than just assuming that punishment is the only effective way to achieve our goals. I think even what Ted was sharing, what Mr. Ramigos was sharing about some of the changes about how the department has even framed its work and its mission speaks to this too. This has been happening at the advocate level, it's been happening in state agencies because we've recognized that in Delaware, sometimes how we framed our policies weren't actually achieving the realities that we wanted for our families, for our communities. So, in recent years, Delaware has passed a law related to fines and fees that I feel is very directly related to some of the topics that we're going to talk about in a child support context. That bill was called HB 244. It passed back in 2022. And some of the core things that that bill did is it um, first made it so that we, as a state in Delaware, would no longer suspend people's licenses solely because they were unable to pay a fine or a fee that was imposed on them as part of a criminal proceeding. So prior to that, that was a really, really common reason that people would lose their licenses in Delaware. They didn't have the money to pay a fine or fee, and a common consequence, not because they didn't want to pay, but just because they didn't have the funds, would mean that their license would be suspended. And so, why is this important? Well, across our country, 86% of Americans drive to work. And in addition to that, many jobs require or strongly prefer um, people who have driver's licenses for those positions. So driver's licenses can be a if you deny people access to a driver's license or revoke driver's licenses, it's a really, really uh, impactful in a negative way, impacting people's ability to access, economic opportunities to actually take care of themselves and take care of their families. So I think what I'm excited about Rep. Dorsey Walker's bill and what I'm excited for her to talk about in a little while too is the fact that if we want to have people pay outstanding debts, if we want to have people actually be able to pay their outstanding child support orders, we definitely don't want to be erecting unnecessary barriers to them being able to do that. We don't want to be incarcerating people if incarceration is not going to do anything to actually help the child support order be paid, and the reason it went unpaid was not due to their actually willfully deciding not to. It was only due to the fact they didn't have funds. And the same thing goes for driver's licenses. When we suspend driver's licenses, we're oftentimes making it harder for people to meet their child support obligations. We're not actually assisting them in taking care of those obligations that people want to take care of their families, whether they're custodial or non-custodial. And we want to make sure, similar, I think, again, what Ted was talking about, that this is about services, this is about supports, this isn't just about enforcement. And so Delaware's been on a path in many different areas, from record clearance to fines and fees. And in this session with Rep. Dorsey Walker's bill, looking at child support orders. we've really been taking a hard look at how we can support people in Delaware. And I think that it's an important conversation we've been having, and I think need to continue to have with this bill and beyond. So Stacy, I hope that's a decent background, and I'm definitely happy to chat more, but don't want to take up too much space.
Yeah, John, thank you so much. That was very helpful. One of the key points that that registered with me really quickly was just the simple fact of how many people have to commute from to and from work daily, and how not having the ability to drive impedes their ability to do so. So that was one of the big takeaways from for me for what you shared. And we absolutely do need to look and explore how we can um, help people meet their obligation, as you stated. To your point, John, we must help people get to the place where they're able to consistently meet their obligation. Because Mr. Murmurgross, I believe that from your standpoint, you do want to see consistency. That is the whole point of having a monthly obligation, is so that monthly obligation is met with regularity. So at this time, I don't think Tony Neal has joined us quite yet. We were gonna we had a little bit of time for him. So
He is having some technical
I know.
difficulties in getting on. He
Okay.
can't get on either by phone or by his laptop. So
Okay.
if he does manage to get on, we will talk. We will, speak with him later. But we can move on to. Go ahead, Stacy.
Our next section. Okay, yeah. So what I'd like to do, we had a couple of questions that Mr. Murmurgross answered for us. If you don't mind answering those questions as I read through them. The first question is, how many individuals are currently in the license suspension program? And just, if you don't mind, Mr. Murmurgross, if you could just explain what the license suspension program is for us, please.
Sure. So in the state of Delaware, the Division of Child Support Services has a license suspension program. The Delaware code says that the division can suspend a driver's license, a hunting and fishing license, a professional license, or a professional license, driver's license. I'm missing one, but it'll come to me. But they said the code says we could suspend a license when an individual is $1,000 in arrears and has not made a payment in 30 days. The code actually says $1,000 or more. We at the Child Support Program have in our system programmed that if an individual goes into arrears of $3,500 and has not made a payment has not made a payment of any kind in 60 days, we will go ahead and send them a notice of intent to suspend the license. Now, one of the things that I'm often telling folks is when someone gets a letter from us, and in this situation, a notice of intent, it's so important that they don't ignore the letter and reach out to us at the Child Support Office, because we definitely want to have we want to have a conversation with them. Just as John was saying, incarcerating someone for non-payment of child support, which is only handled by the family court here in the state of Delaware, the Child Support Program does not have the ability to incarcerate anyone or to suspend a license. We want to be able to have a conversation with them. Incarcerating someone or suspending a license does not do us any good. So, we often, when contacted by a non-custodial parent who has received a letter of intent, we will work with them. Our policy is, in order for the license to not be suspended or to have the license reinstated, the person would have to make a lump sum payment of 2 months worth of their child support order. Now, we are what I would like to consider ourselves extremely flexible. So if an individual comes to us and says, I don't have 2 months worth of my child support obligation. We will work with them on a lesser amount. Or if they can tell us where they're employed, so we can send an order of income withholding to that employer just to have those child support payments start on a regular basis. We will go ahead and reinstate the license. So I always like to say that that notice going out to the non-custodial parent is really a conversation starter. Like to have a conversation with us at the child support office so we can find out what their situation is and take appropriate steps by working with them in order to avoid having that license suspended.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. So,
Yeah.
in that conversation starter, I just am curious, is there a, I don't know, is there like a protocol that you all follow? Does it vary per the customer service representative that an individual may speak with? What type of parameters are set basically
Right.
for the ability to work with someone?
Yeah. So when a non-custodial parent comes into our office and says that they got a notice of intent to suspend their license, they will meet with a child support specialist who will gather the information from them and determine what the situation is by having a conversation with the non-custodial parent. If there is a situation where the individual cannot pay that 2 months lump sum payment, the worker will have a conversation with the supervisor or with an administrator to determine what the appropriate amount that we can kind of negotiate with. Oftentimes, we're contacting custodial parents to gain their part of the conversation, or we're reaching out to the Department of Justice and having a conversation with them. But if a child support specialist needs assistance, they reach out to their supervisor, and the supervisor will then determine what the next best appropriate steps are. But ultimately, we want to see that non-custodial parent succeed. And the one thing that from our perspective, also we have to be cognizant of the custodial parent. We have to be cognizant of the single parent households that these funds are going to. Just in federal fiscal year 2022 and 2023, specifically associated with license suspension, we collected $2 million in child support each year. Already in state fiscal year 2024, we've collected $600,000 solely associated with license suspension. And just last week, I had a non-custodial parent come in and make a $26,000 payment in order to have his license reinstated. So I just wanted to make sure people understood that oftentimes individuals do have the funds and do have the opportunity to work with us. We don't want to see people not being able to get employed. John, you are absolutely correct. When they're working, we can send a wage withholding and we can get regular payments in the door. So I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, that's absolutely helpful. One thing that you mentioned was that the money that was collected and it goes to the single parent home. However, I'm sure you've seen numerous cases that have come up that are in arrears. And I'll just give an example. Perhaps someone was incarcerated for a lengthy period of time. They return home. That child that was, in the single parent home is now emancipated and above the age of 18. And so in those instances, the individuals who have children that are adults are still in that same pool, basically. So is there anything that differentiates between those individual cases and the ones who actually have children who are under the age of 18? And then also, if you could speak on the part that is for individuals that are receiving TANF benefits, because there's some repayment that has to happen from the non-custodial parent. So all of the arrears amounts that exist don't necessarily equate to, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a child under the age of 18.
Right. So, so when we talk about child support arrears, so when a child emancipates and the current support obligation ends, any arrears that were owed to the custodial parent that were unpaid by the non-custodial parent are still owed until that obligation is satisfied.
And that's for the state of Delaware as well. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I
That's
just want
okay.
to make
Yeah,
sure
that's okay.
that I want to make sure we have clarity there.
Yep,
Mhm.
it's also any arrears that are owed to the state of Delaware for when the custodial parent was receiving TANF benefits. If there has not been a payment in 60 days, that notice, the notice of intent to suspend a license would go out to an individual. Now, you also mentioned when an individual is incarcerated. If an individual is incarcerated, they should not, as long as we have that information in our system that they are incarcerated, they should not receive a notice of intent to suspend a license. And if that did happen, we would quickly, and we've had situations where an individual has said, "Hey, I was incarcerated." We were able to do the research in our child support system. And if that was the case, we would unsuspend, we would send the notice to the licensing agency to unsuspend a license. And, we would make sure that there were no fees or anything like that with the licensing agency.
Okay. And back to the original question, and I think I just bounced around a little bit, so I apologize. But just curious to know, in the state of Delaware, how many licenses have actually been suspended?
So, so there's 9,180 licenses that have been suspended in the state of Delaware.
And that's in total, or is that
That's in
currently?
total. And, for, just to put it in some kind of, put it in some perspective, we have approximately 79,000 child support cases here in the state of Delaware.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right. And so out of those 79,000, because I there was an amount, I believe it 340 million you presented at the legislative hall, and that number included deceased individuals and included incarcerated individuals. So we're just trying to, in its totality, get an idea of what the state of Delaware looks like in regard to the total number of license that gets suspended, perhaps over a 12-month period or a 24-month period, just to give us some idea of the frequency in which that happens. And also for the business license, because at this point, and I just want to make this point, and then you can answer the question. There are individuals who may come home from being incarcerated and decide they want to perhaps take up a trade, maybe become a barber, for example. In this instance, if a person is, struggling to try to get a business going and hasn't made those payments, it's very possible that they could lose their license before they ever have an opportunity to really earn enough to even sustain themselves. So,
So as I've already mentioned, if an individual is incarcerated, we would not be sending them a notice of intent to suspend a license. So if they say, "Hey, I was incarcerated. That's why you didn't get any child support payments. That's why my arrears went over 3,500." We would take action to if a license had been suspended, we would unsuspend it. If the person was incarcerated at the time a notice of intent was issued
okay.
to that
For how
individual.
long would the suspension be forgiven or lifted? Say if an individual were to come home from incarceration, I believe, what is the actual number of days that a person has from the time they return from incarceration to when the actual enforcement and license suspension process begins?
Yeah, so we actually just reprogrammed our child support system here in the state of Delaware to not take any action related to license suspension for anyone who is incarcerated for 90 days from their maximum release date within, we have access to Delegist, the system that keeps track of when people are going to be released from incarceration. So we have recently programmed our system to not take any action against anyone who is incarcerated as it's related to license suspension for 90 days. And then, Ms. Burton, you also mentioned, and I don't want people to get confused because we're kind of jumping around a little bit. When you first started saying, you mentioned $340 million.
Yes, sir, I did.
That's the actual amount of arrears that are owed on every case that has a child support order in our system.
I see.
So, as you were mentioning, there are some situations where the custodial parent is deceased, and there's certain things we have to do with the register of wills, and that case remains open for a certain amount of time in order to make sure that there is not an estate for that deceased custodial parent. So there's cases that are in our system that we're moving towards closing, but and that requires removing arrearages and all of that kind of stuff. So that is the total arrears that are owed in the state of Delaware. It has nothing to do with individuals incarcerated or the number of licenses suspended. It has nothing to do with that.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, so Alfred Cannon has his hand up, and then so we're gonna allow him a few moments, and then Tony Neal has joined us. Hello, Reverend Tony Neal. Thank you for joining us. So we're gonna go ahead and allow Alfred an opportunity to speak, and then after Alfred, Reverend Tony Neal is gonna share his thoughts.
Good evening. I'm sorry. I believe that the hand raised emoji was actually a mistake.
No
I
worries.
did have something to say, but I'll let us move on.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, you're free to speak now if you would like.
No, you can go
Okay,
ahead.
okay, all right. So everyone, we're gonna have Reverend Tony Neal have an opportunity to share his thoughts. And thank you
First of
so
all,
much.
yes, I'm sorry. I want to apologize because this laptop is not acting right tonight. But I really want to share my thoughts on this is because this um this child support thing that affected a lot of people. It's some done things, especially to the African American community. And I look at it when you if you take a man out of a vehicle and you put him on a bicycle, it's like degrading him. He kind of feels he lost everything. So I done dealt with many people over the years that wasn't able to even get around because of this situation. But I feel like if these individuals had driver license, I think they've been better off. I know back in the day, I had to go to court for child support, and one of the worst things that I had to do was when I went to court, there was adding up a lot of things I didn't understand it was talking about, and what they were doing, they was counting up my money that I had used for my bills, and I never understood that. How can people count up money says this is what you can need for your bills, and it's I think it basically degraded me a little bit, and I think that's what a lot of people go through right now. And it's a lot of guys that lose their license behind child support, and I think they start dealing with a lot of mental health issues also. So it takes them to a different place. A man takes pride coming up in our day. I took pride in a car, and you take a man from 4 wheels and put him on 2 wheels, it does something to him. And I think we really hurted our community back then. And it's time for real change. And I believe people, you put this back on the table, this won't be happening no more. I believe you'll have a lot more success stories in our community. Also, I wrote a couple things down. And like I said, I believe it affect them mentally in a lot of ways. After a while, after a person stay in a position so long, they seem to stop caring about themselves. And I think that's what it done to a whole lot of people. So change can be important for me. I mean, because people is real still dealing with this thing from years. I mean, not just it's from years ago. When you stay in this condition for all these many years, it's kind of like you give up hope a little bit. So I'm thinking when these laws change, when things come about and people can get the driver license back, this thing don't affect them. But I never understood how you could take a man driver license and expect him to be successful. How can he get to work? How can he support his family? So I think some kind of way that's the greater part to me. And I never understood that. So, but now I see some things trying to change. I commend this group on trying to change these laws. I mean, to me, it's important. I talked to a few people. I even talked to Mr. Cannon. He was telling me how this really affected him. So, thank you again for sharing that little bit. But I kind of lost some of my thoughts trying to get on here tonight. Okay. So
It's okay. We thank you for those thoughts. I mean, I believe you are spot on when you say that it really is degrading to an individual to lose their ability to drive, especially if they live in Sussex County. I know the northern part of the county has a little bit more uh transportation services, but if you're in Sussex County and say you live in Seaford and you need to commute over to Rehoboth, that's going to be an issue. That's going to be an issue. And it also is just one of those things. It's a privilege to be able to have a driver's license, and to lose it for a non-driving violation seems a bit harsh. And then to that point, with the driver's license suspensions, they appear on your driving record as a suspension. And so when you go to apply for auto insurance, or to, get insurance, if you get your car and get it insured, you're gonna count on paying a higher premium for having a driver license suspension. So that suspension, again, for a non-driving violation, then equates to a higher insurance premium. So, it's Mr. Merman-Gross, do you have a comment on anything that Mr. Neal shared with us? Or anyone? It doesn't have to be Mr. Merman-Gross.
but I do feel that
I
people do need to take care of the child support, but I feel like it should be a different way. They gotta have a different kind of plan. So
Yeah.
the responsibility is important. I don't want to demean that. But
Yes.
it is a great responsibility, but it should be a different way to go about getting this done.
Yes. I couldn't agree with you more. I couldn't agree with you more. So there's a few hands raised. I'll go with Mr. Andrews if you want to go ahead and share your thoughts.
Yes, as I was listening to Reverend Tony Neal, that can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Yes. When I was listening to him, and it's very degrading. And when you get to the point your license getting taken away from you, how are you able to get to the job and do the work? It was times where I would take any job. I just wanted to work. I wanted to be able to meet my obligation. And when you suspend my license and I live 5 or 10 miles away from the job, I end up riding a bike 13 miles, getting up 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. I wanted to give up mentally, physically, and spiritually. And I felt like if I gave up, then where would I be for my children to be able to help them? And that pushed me. But mentally and physically, it was destroying me.
Right. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing that. Mr. Cooper, you have your hand raised.
Yeah. You know, I know we don't hear about the child support and the process, but we're leaving out another person and another entity. And to me, you got to talk about both entities in order for it to get some type of structure is family court. And there's such a disconnect between family court and child support. I'm saying this as a person still paying child support, and I work at family court division of criminal. Like those two people don't communicate as well. So, you know, for Ted, he's dealing with the order. But now for the mental health of it, I'm already getting treated like a deadbeat because I'm there. Then I went to child support, and I don't know what's going on now, but you kind of get treated dirty there too. You know, it's like I'm getting judged and nobody knows my story, and I feel like nobody cares.
Well, we definitely care, and that is part of why we're doing this town hall, because we want your voices heard. We want there to be an understanding of the importance of paying child support, but we also want to look at the hardships that are created for fathers who may come into a point in their lives where they're having some difficulties, and those difficulties are then compounded by the loss of license and driving privileges. And let's see, I have Shakur. I hope I said, you had your hand raised.
Yes, and
Yes.
my concern was when I was on child support, and I was reneging to pay child support only because I found out that the mother was using substances, and I didn't want my money to go to the substance instead of my child. Now, I was able to take care of my child on my own without having to go through child support, but family court wouldn't let that happen. I was already paying and providing his needs, but they saw it fit to put me on child support. So when on child support, I fought it, but I fought it through DFS to have the mother take a drug test, but not just urine test, but also blood and hair follicles, where the true story is at. Because we know people can get over on urine tests, but they can't get over on blood samples as well as hair follicles. So once they went after that, she eventually gave up custody to me. And now there's no one going after her to pay me child support after all these years. Mind you, I had him since he was 2 years old. He is 13 now, doing great. But they were so adamant on going after me, but as far as with her, they was real reluctant in going after her, you know. And I know because I work in the system to where we know you can track people through their social security card. You can know what state they're in, you can know what area they're in. But every time I've been dealing with child support for over 3 years to try to find her, and I bring this to their attention, and they're reluctant on trying to find her as they found me, which I wasn't hiding, because that was my first son. I wanted to meet my obligations to him without child support or without family court. But unfortunately, that wasn't the case. But now when it's time for her to handle her obligations to my son, she evaded the system for over 8 or 9 years. I don't understand that process. And that process bewildered me because it was so easy to find me and locate me through my social security number. But with her, they can't locate her. And she's back in the state of Delaware from Tennessee. And no one from child support has contacted me yet concerning them locating her or where she's at to meet her obligations. But they still sending me letters stating that they're on the case. Wow. I'm like, you know, that's kind of, but when it was time for me to pay, and I was working for the Red Health Center, so I was able to afford the child support payments, which was $500 and something a month for one child. But they said I had a responsibility to all the other children in the household too that wasn't mine. And my license was threatened to be taken away from me and everything else, and threatened with incarceration. And I needed my license to transport clients to AI DuPont, to Wilmington, from Georgetown, Delaware. Now, if they were so adamant on coming after me, which was understandable, why are they not adamant on going after her for her obligations to our son as well? whether she's in his life or not.
Right.
Her obligations is to make sure his financial needs are met.
Are
But
met.
that's
I
not the
agree.
case. Yeah.
I agree. I agree. And so, thank you for, sharing your personal story, and, expressing that there's a difference in how fathers are treated versus mothers, in your personal situation. Just because of time, I mean, we could talk about this issue for hours, I'm sure. But we don't have hours tonight. We do plan to do a second part to this town hall, so that we can maybe gather some more data and have more specific numbers. But I'm going to allow Kevin Andrews a chance. And then after that, we want to hear from our representative, Sherry Dorsey Walker, so she can talk a little bit more about the bill that she has. So Kevin, if you want to go ahead.
Yes. I just want to share with you my time with child support. I ended up falling behind on rears, not because I didn't want to work. I didn't have no transportation because I ended up losing my license. And when I lost my license, I lost my hope, I lost my dream. I felt like, I was like we're saying with child support in the courts, there's no communication. And I know that y'all get in contact with them, but the decisions is based off what they want. And then you get incarcerated, you get locked up. And I end up getting locked up for child support. I end up in work release. Then I get in work release. Okay, you know what? Well, they know I'm here. They know I want to go to work. But when someone does something inside work release, it shuts everybody down. No one can get out. Then guess what happened then? You lose your job. Then I go back before the judge and the judge said, you're not working. I tell the judge, they won't let me out. What's the purpose of taking people's license? What's the purpose of taking people hope away when they want to do the right thing and can't do the right thing? And to be honest with you, I never thought I would get out of the system. Never ever thought I would get out of the system. But I had to keep pushing. It was times when my kids needed it, and I felt like as a father that I should make sure to get it right then and there. I couldn't wait till they go through the process of getting the money to them. They needed it then. Then when I end up doing that, I get in contempt of court because I was supposed to give it through child support. Well, at that moment, I felt my kids needed food, they needed shelter. I did what I had to do. The thing of it is, give people a fair chance, opportunity to be able to survive, to be able to take care of the kids. There's a lot of men out here want to take care of the children, but they don't get the opportunity to be able to do that. They get judged, they get marked, and you're stereotyped, like, well, you don't want to pay it. You don't want to pay it. Well, how can I pay it? You took my license. Then I listened to what Ted said when he was saying that you pay a lump sum. Well, I'm already working, making five something. At that time, making $550, not making enough money to even meet the obligation. So how am I gonna come up with a lump sum? I can't even hardly. I end up homeless because of that.
Right.
Because
right.
I couldn't be able to even take care of my responsibility. But then I end up homeless. So mentally and physically, it affected me. It almost destroyed me. But I kept pushing and I pushed and I pushed. Opportunities came. But it shouldn't be where the system breaks the person. It should be the system should be able to help the person to meet their obligations. So that's how I feel about that. But like I said to anyone, it's not easy, but it's a lack of communication. Don't look just at the paperwork. Communicate with me. See where I'm at. See what I'm having issues at. Because what's happening, I'm not having issues because I want to have it. Why put more kindle on the fire? I'm already down trying to get up to take care of my kids. That's degrading to me. That's hurtful to me. That I can't meet my children's needs.
Right.
Then you take my license. Now I'm really done. I'm really done. And I thought, well, if I start my own business, because that was mentioned, I know you brought it up by the bar.
Mhm.
I want to start my own business so I can make money and be proud, and my children be proud of me. But when I'm trying to get started and get it going, things happen. I end up now not able to even keep my business, so my license got taken for the business. So I was just in a no-win situation.
Right.
So I'd just like to share that.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing that. And now we're going to pivot a little bit and allow Representative Dorsey Walker to talk about HB 267. And you're on mute.
Okay. Good evening,
There you go.
everyone. Thank you. Thank you to our moderator, Ms. Stacy Burton, and to SDARJ, and to all of you who are here this evening, Mr. Andrews, Mr. Shakur, Reverend Neal, Mr. Cooper, and we'll hear from Brother Ken. And thank you so much for sharing your stories. In the 90s, there was a federal mandate that when someone was caught with drugs, that they would be incarcerated. And here we are in 2024, we're now looking at drugs as an addiction. And look at all those individuals who were incarcerated, and some of them may still be serving some form of a sentence. You just heard from Mr. Andrews, whether you're incarcerated physically or mentally. He's right. The system should not be breaking individuals, and that's just what happens when your license is revoked or when you are incarcerated, when you are willfully trying to pay the child support. There are those who may not be willfully trying to pay their child support. That's a totally different dynamic. We're talking about the individuals, those who even spoke this evening, and that's what House Bill 267 does. It shifts the atmosphere, it shifts the culture. Just like our country many years ago, as I mentioned, the idea of drugs. Now drugs are an addiction. There's conversation at the federal level that incarcerating and taking away the license may not have been the best course of action. At the time, it sounded like a great idea. But now, as you start to talk about family reunification, talk about the non-custodial parent being involved in a child's life. Just because the parents didn't work out, their relationship did not work out the way that they had anticipated, doesn't mean that the child should suffer for the rest of his or her life. And when you take the non-custodial parent out of the equation for child support, you take away the license. How's the non-custodial parent supposed to visit the child if he or she doesn't have a license? You heard Ms. Burton talk about being in Sussex County. Western Sussex is very different from Eastern Sussex. When you talk about transportation, it can take up to an hour and a half to go from Western Sussex to Eastern Sussex using DART. That's that 90 minutes that a parent cannot see their child because that parent is now forced to take public transportation if they can even afford it. So let's talk about, or if they have to go from Western Sussex to Eastern Sussex to work. So when we think about House Bill 267, this is a way that we can start reunifying families. It's a way that we can start making the non-custodial parent whole. And it can also ensure that our children get to see their parents. Because let's be honest, sometimes the parent who does have custody, that parent has a stronghold. You have a stronghold over the child, you have a stronghold. You can go to the system and say, I'm not getting my just desserts, so to speak, and I'm not getting the child support. And the child support system will say, okay, we'll send a letter. And when that letter goes out, I have been in the presence of individuals who receive that letter, and you should see they can go from having a wonderful day to crumbling. Like, oh my goodness, my license is about to be revoked. I'm about to be incarcerated, but I'm willfully paying the child support. I knew one father who actually had custody of the child and still received a child support order. And the other parent was the non-custodial parent, but due to the fact that, and I don't want to say that it's just gender, but this was a man and the non-custodial parent was a woman. And the non-custodial parent, the parent who actually had custody of the child, it was stated that this parent still had to pay the mother of the child. The license was revoked for this particular parent, but this is just one example of thousands of stories. And I've been in conversation with Ms. Burton, Ms. King, and many others from Southern in Sussex, I was about to say Southern Delaware, Sussex County, and finding out that this is an issue in Sussex and Kent and Newcastle County. And so knowing that we needed to do something about it. So for all of you, Mr. Reynolds and many others on here, thank you for standing in the gap with me and for coming and testifying about the need for House Bill 267. So right now, 267 passed the House and it's in the Senate. So I urge many of you to reach out to your senators to ensure that the bill passes in the Senate so the governor can sign it, and this can become the law of the land, that we stop the revocation of the license and stop the incarceration of the non-custodial parent when they are willfully trying to pay the child support. And I thank you for this time on this evening.
Rep. Dorsey Walker, I appreciate you. I thank you for all that you do, and for hearing your constituents and then taking action based on what you hear. That speaks volumes about the type of person you are and the type of representative you are for your district. And I appreciate you. I can't express that enough. There is another hand raised. Alfred Cannon, your hand is raised. I'm going to call on you again. I don't know if this one is intentional or not, but did you want to share something? Mr. Cannon?
Yes.
Okay. Was there something that you wanted to share? I want to just make sure you have an opportunity.
Yeah, I just wanted to share that. I just wanted to speak about the communication part. Just to say that, like, we got the license and all. I think we heard a lot about that. It affected me too, but I just wanted to talk about how, like, I had custody of my son. They had taken all custodial rights from his mother, and I was still paying $375 a month for child support. They never took, I never was aware of the fact that once you get them, you got to file all this additional paperwork and all this. Nobody ever helped me, none of that. Blase boom. At this point, when it's time for her to pay me, and she was in the system. Like I said, she lost all her custodial rights and everything. So she was in the system, but they couldn't seem to get her to pay me child support. It never seemed to work out. When it did, they sent me a letter that said, oh, in a month, your son will be 18. By the time you could get a court date, it would be pointless. So at this stage, we're just going to consider it. I forget what the technical word they use, but basically, I should consider it a loss. She wasn't going to pay me anything, and I still owed her $6,000 in arrears. So we went through a process. Finally, the judge said, like, I've never done this in 25 years, but I'll give you $2,500. I'll take it off of the arrears that you owe her. So they said they took it off. 3 years later, the Division of Child Support had never heard about this and had never done it. So, it's just, the communication piece is terrible. It caused me to lose my license and everything. I lost my job because Fleet reported that my license were suspended. So I lost my job because part of my job was to get state clients to wherever they needed to go. So that, I just wanted to piggyback on what everyone was saying. Like this, we have to change these laws because, I wasn't successful at all. I lost a lot, and it just doesn't make sense to put me in jail. My son's not getting cared for, to take my license, because that you taking my license caused me to lose my job. So now you lock me up, and then you try to force, a $2,800 payment immediately, or I would have to stay in lockup. So it's a lot that goes on that's really crazy, and it doesn't add up. It doesn't work. And like I said to the judge, to me, it doesn't work in the best interest of my child at all. It's the best interest of my child to see both parents to be taken care of. but I'm locked up. He's not getting taken care of. Even when he was with me, I got locked up. And where did he have to go? Live with somebody who had to take care of him. So did my other children, all because of child support. So it would be really beneficial to, men if we would really change these laws. I don't see a lot of mothers being affected this way. Like I said, my son's mom did what she did and they couldn't find her. She was in the system, and still nothing done. Until this day. I can't take business opportunities. I can't take, trips with and my son is grown. Most of my children are grown, but I can't get a passport because I still owe her $6,000. So I can't, even travel with my son and my grandchildren now. And I can't even experience life with him as an adult because this is still lingering on. So
Mr. Cannon,
that's all I want to share.
I really appreciate you sharing that. And to your point, Mr. Cannon, I have a close person in my life that I know who had two of the custodial parents do a forgiveness of the child support. And then Delaware does not have an official way of forgiving child support arrears. But there is a form that can be filled out and notarized, and I'm not sure if that's public knowledge, but it should be. The custodial parent can ultimately forgive the arrears. However, only the arrears that is owed to the custodial parent. So one of the things that I wanted to make sure we had a clear understanding of is that that $340 million that's owed in arrears, that's not all to parents. That number includes the number that also the state gets. So whenever you have a child support case, you have an obligation to pay the child support. However, there is a portion of that in some cases that is actually owed to the state of Delaware. And so you can that forgiveness form is something that can be done. But there were instances, just as Mr. Cannon stated, that the forgiveness or the child support enforcement didn't properly update the account to reflect what was actually forgiven. So I do agree that there's a barrier somewhere with the communication that that could really stand to be improved upon.
So can I ask you one more question?
Sure.
When you say custodial parent and we have joint custody, and then her rights are completely taken, so she has no rights to my son, I'm granted full custody
Okay.
by family court.
Okay.
And I'm still dealing with this custodial parent thing. I'm like, but I'm the custodial parent.
You are the
So I'm
custodian.
confused as to why is there no enforcement on my end? And that's why I say it's crazy because they call themselves Division of Child Support Enforcement. And there seems to be no enforcement but on one side.
Well, they've changed your name to Division of Child Support Services. So the enforcement part isn't there any longer. However, I would hope that in these conversations we could establish a better relationship with the non-custodial parent as well as the custodial parent, because
Right.
the non-custodial parent is impacted by this system, by the Division of Child Support's enforcement efforts, so to speak. So that is something, again, Delaware does not have a actual way of having your arrears forgiven except through having the custodial parent having a notarized document that says they're willing to forego the amount that is owed to them. But that does not stop the amount that is owed to the state of Delaware. So we Does anyone else have any questions at the moment or any comments? John Reynolds, please.
I just wanted to highlight quickly that I think a lot of what we're talking about here too is this is why good policymaking and legislating is so important. This is why Rep. Dorsey Walker's bill is so important, because I think everybody who's on the call tonight has talked about the system we want, right? We want a system. Like as Ted was outlining the mission of his division and the mission of kind of the state agency is about support and services and making sure that children are well taken care of and the custodial and non-custodial parents are receiving support in meeting their respective obligations to their child, right? And so I think one of the most important things about HB 267 is the fact that it's trying to take what we all agree are how we want the system to work and try and make sure that becomes the baseline. If you look at Delaware's law right now, it as actually Ted highlighted earlier, there's certain parts of the law that say that set certain baselines or punishments and enable them to be enacted at lower thresholds than are probably useful, than are probably necessary, and are actually and sometimes counterproductive. So I think the importance of what everybody who's listening tonight, everybody who's speaking as part of this panel, is that we have something really powerful, right? We're all constituents of somebody in this state. And we can use our voices to support moving forwards with a bill that's seeking to break this cycle, that's seeking to actually center the idea of support rather than enforcement and punishment. And that's just something, again, I wanted to call out and remind people that we've heard a lot of the ways that things are not working. And they can be they're very, very true, but we're not powerless in the face of these. We have the ability to change, and it won't always be fast. And Rep. Dorsey Walker's bill is very, very important next step, but I can't promise that it would necessarily be the finish line. We'd
Right.
still have more work to do collectively to make sure we get to where we need to go.
Absolutely, John. I could not agree with you more. And I strongly think that just having this type of dialogue and being able to openly speak about the parts of the system that is causing more harm than it is good, that's what's important here. That's what we all should be able to come together and sort through. For example, as Mr. Andrews was saying, you have to come up with a lump sum. Most of us, and I'm going to say me included, if not now, have in the past lived paycheck to paycheck, right? If you're living paycheck to paycheck and someone says to you, you've got to pay a lump sum of this amount in order to get your license back, the probability of you being able to do that is very small, because it just the way things are right now, the economy, the inflation, all of the things that are happening, it's happening to the folks that are obligators to pay child support as well. One thing that I mentioned to Clara earlier in the week, or maybe even today even, is that the stimulus checks that were sent, some of them were intercepted. The federal government decides, hey, we need to send out a stimulus, but the Division of Child Support intercepted it. That to me is an eye opener, because if the government is saying on one hand, we need to send this money to you, and then on the other hand, but wait a minute, we're going to take it. I think that's a major issue. And like I said, if people are living paycheck to paycheck, asking them to come up with a lump sum just doesn't seem like a feasible thing. It doesn't. Rep. Dorsey Walker has her hand raised. Please.
Thank you, Ms. Burton. I mentioned those who testified, and I did not say Director Murmagos directly, and I would like to just thank him for being present for the hearing for House Bill 267 and for testifying and for helping us get it over the finish line in the House. And I'm sure he'll probably be called upon in the Senate. So I did want to take a moment and just thank him for his time and his willingness to work with myself and many others to bring about the necessary changes with the system. Thank you, Director.
sorry, I was muted. As Ted had mentioned earlier, about changing cultures, that's something that's going to take time. I have heard repeatedly, and I've experienced personally with someone that I know, that making that call to the Division of Child Support when you are in arrears or when you are facing license suspension is not an easy call to make. And at times, I'm not going to say all the time, but there are times when the caller feels devalued, where they feel that nothing they do is going to be enough to get what they need. You're basically finding yourself at the mercy of the person on the other end. And that is not a good position to be in. No one wants to feel at the mercy of another person, especially when it relates to their viability and their ability to drive and all of these other things. So yes, Kevin Andrews, you have your hand raised.
No, I'm sorry. No, I didn't.
Oh, okay.
That was from a while ago.
Okay, no worries.
Sorry.
Mr. Cooper, you had your hand raised.
Yeah, this is more of a question. I just feel like, you ever heard the saying that, you throw rocks and then put your hand in your pockets? I feel like family court and child support act in a partisan way. And until they could be a little bipartisan on it, I don't know how Ted can do what he can do. Because you're not getting it. He's not getting it from the ground level. He's getting it on the back end. But there's some other people who made decisions who've taken myself and Mr. Andrews and all these people to his doorstep. So how do we get these two entities aligned? Which is my question.
If I could mention something, the family court in the state of Delaware is part of the judicial branch of state government. Child support is in the executive branch of state government. And technically, the child support program is a litigant of the family court. So what you want is really for us to be, we really need to be, and want to remain separate, so that there is that level of the court doing their thing and the child support program doing our thing. We work closely with the Department of Justice. They're the child support program's attorney, but you don't want, I've heard it several times this evening, you don't want the family court and the child support program, to be, there's got to be that level of, objectivity that the court has separate from the child support program in the state of Delaware. But I would also like to say this. If you have concerns with the family court, and oftentimes, I should have mentioned this, oftentimes the child support program and the family court and the responsibility of both of our entities get mixed up. Sometimes they think it's us and it's really the court taking an action, and vice versa. But if you have a concern with the family court, I would encourage you to reach out to the Family Law Commission. And annually, that's the Family Law Commission, and annually they have a public event where individuals can come and voice concern with issues that they have as it relates to the family court and how the family court functions. So I would encourage people to take advantage of that, the Family Law Commission. And then one other thing, Stacy, you mentioned a couple things. Just real quick, when we talk about TANF arrears, TANF arrears and the collection of those arrears are actually revenue that comes back into the child support program. So when you talk about forgiving, TANF arrears, those funds, if taken away from the child support program, have to come from somewhere else. And we're willing to take funds from any source that's willing to give them to us. So whether it's the legislature, whether it's the governor, but I just caution folks from thinking that TANF collections can be just wiped out, because that would put a damper on the budget of the child support program here in the state of Delaware. And then the last thing I wanted to mention, specifically related to the stimulus check, the first stimulus check issued by the federal government, it specifically stated in the federal law that child support could intercept that check for the purposes of child support arrearages. Specifically says it in the federal law. In payments that stimulus checks that came out under the Biden administration, they removed that language, and we did not intercept it. So we certainly did not have a choice. We had to accept it, and we did apply those payments and sent those payments out to custodial parents where they were applied. So just wanted to make sure that was clear. Those stimulus checks, it wasn't anything we did here in the state of Delaware. It was in the federal law that child support agencies around the country were to be sent those checks. So thank you very much. And the only thing that I'll say before I conclude is, like we've talked a little bit about today, we certainly want to be helpful at the child support program. So I encourage all of you individuals who have raised concerns. I'll make sure that my presentation, you actually have my presentation. My contact information is in that presentation for a reason. I want people that have challenges or concerns with our child support program. You can reach out to me directly, and I will be more than happy to have a conversation. And where I can step in, try to rectify a situation that may have gone awry. Although I would like to think that we're perfect, we do make mistakes, and we try quickly to fix those mistakes. And I really appreciate giving me the opportunity to come here today. More than happy to come in the future if there are future conversations about child support in the state of Delaware. So thank you.
Yes, absolutely. And we appreciate you being here just to share insight and give us information that we otherwise may not, have access to. So we have time for one final question here. And it's a question, but I also want it to be something that's going to allow us to kind of leave here with our thinking caps on and prepare for, maybe what the next discussion is going to be. So as it relates to incarceration and license suspension, because that's the big thing right here, license suspension and incarceration. How are we doing as far as payments received? Is the license suspension program bringing in more revenue for the state for child support enforcement? And if that is the case, is it because it's affecting the population of folks that really have the money to pay and choosing not to, rather than the individuals such as those who are on our panel tonight, who have had hardships, have, fought their way through and are struggling? So we want to be able to have a clear picture and understanding of, we know how license suspensions are impacting us and the community and transportation, and fathers can't even go see their kids because they can't drive. But are those numbers, what are those numbers? And if it's ineffective, or even if it's slightly effective, what population of people is it really effective with? Because those who are already struggling, like I said, paycheck to paycheck, you can't pay a lump sum. So that's like my final question that I kind of want us to have a second part to this. So
Sure. So if I can go first, I'll say this. So let me first start off with the easy question. The only entity here in the state of Delaware that can incarcerate anyone for child support is the family court. Child support cannot incarcerate any individuals. And the one thing I will say about incarceration, the family court, it's really considered a last resort. And what normally happens in these situations is the courts will have a hearing, and they will say, non-custodial parent, you're to do, get it, find employment, or at least tell us where you've looked, for employment. You need to start making regular child support payment. And then they say, we're going to schedule you back to come back before the court in 3 months. If the non-custodial parent has meeting the obligation as outlined in the family court order, then everything is fine. It's only those individuals where review hearing after review hearing after review hearing, that they continue to not comply with the family court's direction. As a last resort, the family court can impose incarceration. The family court, I'm not here to be speaking on behalf of the family court,
Right.
but the child support program and the family court do not want to see people incarcerated. I think, as John said earlier, it really does defeat the purpose. We want to see people employed and working, and let us go ahead and send a wage withholding to that employer to have those payments be sent to the child support office so that we can send them to the custodial parent. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we do collect, for the last 2 years, we collected just over $2 million each year. And so far in state fiscal year 2024, we've already collected $600,000 specifically associated with license suspension. And, when we talk about affected individuals, I mean, I would say that, I can't tell you specifically what individuals are being brought into the license suspension program, but I can tell you this: the license suspension program at the child support office is an automated process. So there's not a child support specialist hitting a button on their keypad or on their computer that says, I'm going to suspend Joe's license today. The computer system is every night is running through a system, and it's determining, did this individual meet the $3,500 in total arrears, and have they not made a payment of any kind in 60 days? I'm often getting myself in trouble with custodial parents because I tell non-custodial parents, if you cannot pay what the courts have ordered, pay something regularly and get back into family court to file for a modification. Because that way the courts will see, hey, he's got an order for $100 a month, but he's paying, $25, but he's paying it every month until he could have got into court to have a modification done. So I'm always encouraging people, if you can't pay what the court order is because maybe you lost a job or you're in a job that didn't pay as much as when the court order was established, you should go ahead and file for a modification, but you got to pay something on that child support order. Else the computer system is going to determine who has come into that threshold, and no payment in 60 days, quite honestly, that's, in my mind, it is quite of a long time without making a payment to the child support office of any kind. So, it's not like someone is actually hitting their keypad and saying, I'm going to go after this person today. We just don't do it like that. And then the last thing I'll say, Stacy, is this: anybody who needs help, they can come and talk to us. I know sometimes there are difficult conversations, but we want to be able to have those conversations. We don't want people to throw those letters in the mail or in the trash. We want them to pay attention and come and talk to us because we want to work with them.
Well, I'm glad that you are vocal about wanting to work with a lot of folks, constituents and individuals in the community don't quite see it that way. And so I'm not sure what needs to happen for that to be how they feel, because they're the ones that will be making the phone calls. So we're really, really low on time, but I don't want to skip out on our last few people. Rep. Dorsey Walker, Mr. Shakur, and then Mr. Cooper. I want to make sure you guys have an opportunity. So Rep. Dorsey Walker, please.
Thank you, Ms. Burton. And again, what a great job you did moderating this conversation this evening.
Thank you.
I did desire to leave everyone with a sense of hope. There is hope. House Bill 267 passed the House. It is in the Senate now. You now have a senator, well, you have several senators from Sussex County. Reach out to them. Reach out to your senators, whether they're in Sussex, Kent, or Newcastle County, and let them know that this is a bill you'd like to see passed. Legislators move according to what the constituents desire to see. Real legislators who care about the people, let me say that, move according to what the people desire to see. Continue to raise your voices about this issue because it is affecting aspects of our community. It's affecting the non-custodial parent. We want, again, to reunify our families. So there is hope. We don't want anyone feeling broken. We want people feeling uplifted. So continue to fight for justice. And I'll be right here helping you with the process. May God bless you and keep you. And thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Mr. Shakur?
Thank you again, Ms. Dorsey, for your wealth of knowledge. And I want to know how can we get that bill passed in the Senate? What areas in Sussex County we need to canvass to get this bill passed? You let me know, and I'm out there with my team getting it done. Getting the constituents to sign pledges, getting them to scan their phones on barcodes so we can get the word out there, as I do with other bills that we have in the Senate waiting to be passed.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, everyone. Listen, I appreciate you all being here this evening. This is the conclusion of our panel discussion. We do look forward to having a second town hall to discuss in more details, maybe some of the numbers that we can kind of explore and have a good understanding of what's happening as it relates to child support and the negative impacts that it ultimately has on individuals across our state. So with nothing else left to be said, I don't know if Reverend Tony Neal, did you have a final thought? I just didn't want to leave you out.
Just to thank everybody, a wealth of information. Just appreciate the work you're doing and just continue doing it. And we can support and do everything we can do in Sussex on this end. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, that is the conclusion of our town hall for this evening. Again, please look onto Delaware, your Delaware legislator, find out who that person is if you don't know. Reach out to them if you want to, share your input about this bill. And thank you all for participating. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
And everyone, great job.
Good night. Take care.